The winter of 1941 killed more German soldiers than the Red Army did in some sectors. Not bullets, not artillery. Cold. Minus 40 degrees Celsius, the temperature where diesel fuel turns to gel, where touching metal with bare skin welds your flesh to the surface, where your breath freezes in your lungs. Courage meant nothing when your fingers turned black and fell off because you forgot to check them for 30 minutes. Germans froze in their summer uniforms while Soviets learned to survive through systematic paranoia. Finns turned the cold into a weapon. Over 100,000 men died not from combat but from making one small mistake in their morning routine. You're about to see what 24 hours actually looked like at the temperature that stops armies cold. Your breath had frozen overnight on whatever fabric covered your face, creating a layer of ice that crackled when you moved. The temperature inside a dugout hovered just above freezing if you were lucky. Outside, 40 below. Your boots were frozen solid blocks of ice leather that you couldn't force your feet into without warming them first. Some Soviet soldiers slept with their boots inside their coats, pressed against their bodies, because putting on frozen boots could take an hour and cause frostbite in the process. German soldiers didn't have this option. They'd invaded in summer uniforms, wool tunics and leather boots meant for temperate campaigning. Hitler's planners expected the war finished by October. By December, men were stuffing newspapers into their jackets because the winter clothing supplies were frozen somewhere in Poland, stuck on trains that wouldn't move. The morning inspection happened before anything else. Your buddy checked your feet while you checked his. Frostbite doesn't hurt. Your flesh dies while you feel nothing. The tissue goes numb as blood vessels constrict, shutting down circulation to save your core. By the time you notice, your toes are waxy and white, already freezing from the inside. You removed your boots. You removed your socks, damp from yesterday's sweat. You inspected each toe for pale color, hardness, numbness. Your buddy did the same. If either of you saw early-stage frostbite, you started rewarming immediately using body heat. Caught early, soldiers returned to duty. Ignored for a day, the same injury required amputation. The Red Army learned this the hard way. During the Winter War against Finland, frostbite cases hit 51% of cold-related casualties in the first year. Soldiers didn't think to check their own feet. So the Soviet command instituted a buddy system, pairs responsible for each other's extremities. By 1944, frostbite rates dropped to 6%. The difference was forced mutual inspection every single morning. Finns arrived at the front with their own civilian winter gear, wool layers, fur-lined hats, felt boots they'd worn since childhood. The Finnish army couldn't equip everyone with military uniforms, so they issued armbands and let soldiers wear what they'd brought from home. Morning in a snow trench meant digging yourself out. You dug with your entrenching tool, careful not to sweat, because sweat was death. The moisture would freeze against your skin the moment you stopped moving. You learned to work slowly, methodically, keeping your body warm enough to function, but never hot enough to perspire. The Germans never learned this. They worked frantically, trying to generate heat through exertion, soaking their uniforms in sweat that turned to ice the moment they stopped. How many layers you wore determined whether you survived the next 3 hours. Too many and you'd sweat during morning duties. Too few, and your fingers would be numb before you finished your first task. The Germans had summer wool uniforms and whatever they could scavenge. Some wrapped themselves in blankets. Some stole coats from civilians or stripped them from frozen corpses. In December 1941, Propaganda Minister Goebbels went on national radio begging German citizens to mail any winter clothing they could spare to the Eastern Front. At 40 below, exposed skin freezes in minutes. German supply depots had winter gear stockpiled. They'd manufactured it months earlier. The problem was delivery. The trains carrying those coats and gloves were stuck hundreds of kilometers away on frozen rails. Soviet soldiers wore the telegrika, a quilted cotton jacket stuffed with wool batting. The quilting trapped air between layers, creating insulation that kept core temperature stable even when the outer fabric froze solid. The quilted trousers had a button fly and ties at the ankles to keep snow out. No zippers, because metal zippers froze shut. Soviet troops also received valenki, traditional felt boots that Russian peasants had worn for centuries. They looked ridiculous compared to leather military boots. They also didn't freeze solid. Felt stayed flexible at 40 below. Leather didn't. The shapka ushanka, the fur hat with ear flaps, completed the Soviet winter uniform. Officers got real fur. Enlisted men got synthetic fish fur, processed fabric that provided minimal warmth. the ear flaps tied up when merely cold, or down under the chin when deadly. Finnish soldiers wore white snow capes over their civilian winter gear. The cape draped over the body like a sheet, breaking up the human silhouette against snow. Soviet soldiers in their khaki greatcoats stood out like targets. Finnish ski troops disappeared. They'd move through the forest on skis, set up firing positions, kill their targets, and vanish before the Soviets could locate them. Layering followed a pattern. Thin base layers against your skin that wickeded moisture away. Then insulating layers that trapped warm air. Then wind-breaking outer layers. Remove layers before physical exertion. Add them back during rest. Never let yourself sweat. Hot food arrived in mobile field kitchens, wood-fired stoves on wheels pulled to the front lines. The Germans called theirs Gulaschkanone, goulash cannons, because the tall chimney stacks looked like artillery. The kitchens carried massive pots of stew or soup, usually made from potatoes, beans, and whatever meat the supply line delivered. A bowl of hot stew raised your core temperature. Your body had been burning calories all night, maintaining baseline heat. By morning, you were running on fumes. The hot liquid provided immediate thermal input. The average K ration contained 2,830 calories, meant to sustain a soldier for 24 hours. At 40 below, that wasn't enough. When mobile kitchens couldn't reach the front, soldiers improvised. British troops carried Tommy cookers, small folding stoves that burned solidified alcohol tablets. One soldier complained that it took 2 hours to boil half a pint of water. German soldiers adapted the Benghazi burner. Take an empty 4-gallon fuel can, punch holes in the top half, fill the bottom half with sand, pour gasoline into the sand and light it. The waxed cardboard boxes that K rations came in made excellent fire starter. Soviet field kitchens delivered meals multiple times a day because hot food was classified as essential morale support. A soldier who ate hot stew fought better than one who ate frozen rations. Warmth equaled effectiveness. Frozen soldiers couldn't think clearly, couldn't aim accurately, couldn't dig fortifications. Front Kameraden Suppe, comrade soup, was beans, potatoes, and ham boiled into thick stew. Soldiers ate it while hot, burning their tongues because cold soup was worse. Eating with bare hands at 40 below gave you frostbite on your fingers within minutes. So you ate fast. You removed one glove, ate as quickly as possible, put the glove back on. Then you removed the other glove and finished. Digging a foxhole in the frozen ground required explosives. The dirt was frozen solid down to a meter deep. A shovel bounced off the surface like hitting concrete, so soldiers packed small explosive charges into the ground, detonated them, and shoveled the broken earth before it refroze. Every task took twice as long. Cleaning weapons required special low-temperature lubricants because standard gun oil froze solid. If you didn't have the right lubricant, your rifle jammed after 3 shots. The Germans didn't have the right lubricants. Their weapons froze. Their vehicles froze. Their artillery recoil systems froze solid, making the guns inoperable. Soviet soldiers had wood stoves that could be set up in a trench beneath a tank. The stovepipe ran out past the road wheels. The stove kept the engine oil warm enough to remain liquid. This meant Soviet tanks could start when German tanks couldn't. Movement generated body heat. Standing still meant freezing. The problem was that movement caused sweating, and sweat was lethal. You learned to move slowly, deliberately, maintaining just enough activity to stay warm without overheating. Removing layers before exertion was mandatory. If you kept all your layers on while digging or hauling supplies, you'd sweat through your underlayers within 20 minutes. Once wet, those layers lost all insulating value. When you stopped working, your body temperature plummeted. So you calculated. You removed your outer coat before starting work. You worked until you felt the first hint of warmth, then you stopped and added the outer coat back. Midday meant checking your feet again. The buddy system ran constantly. Every few hours, you and your partner inspected extremities, fingers, toes, noses, ears, anywhere blood vessels constricted to preserve core temperature. If you caught frostbite at the white waxy stage before tissue turned black, you could reverse it. Soviet medical units tracked frostbite recovery rates. Second-degree frostbite, 100% return to active duty. Third degree, 98.5%. Fourth degree, where tissue had already died, 60%. The difference between returning to duty and losing a limb was catching the damage early. Frostbite was silent. You couldn't feel it happening. The numbness that preceded tissue death felt identical to normal cold. Your brain couldn't distinguish between temporarily numb from cold and cells are crystallizing and dying. The progression followed a predictable path. Blood vessels in your extremities constricted, shunting blood toward your vital organs. Your body made a choice, sacrificed the periphery to save the core. Your hands and feet went numb. Then they turned pale. Then they turned white and waxy as fluids in the tissue began to freeze. At this stage, you could still recover. Rewarming the affected area would restore circulation. The tissue would turn red and painful as blood returned. Soldiers called this the thaw, and it hurt more than the initial freezing. If you didn't rewarm at the waxy white stage, the tissue continued freezing. Ice crystals formed inside cells, rupturing cell walls. The flesh turned black as tissue died. This was gangrene. The dead tissue had to be removed surgically, usually through amputation. The time between reversible numbness and permanent amputation was measured in hours, sometimes minutes. You couldn't monitor your own frostbite because you couldn't feel it. Your buddy could see it. The buddy check was simple. Remove boots, inspect feet, look for color changes, hardness, numbness. If you saw white waxy patches, begin rewarming immediately. Press the affected foot against warm skin, stomach, armpit, anywhere with body heat. Finnish soldiers had been doing this since childhood. Growing up in a country where winter lasted 6 months meant learning cold weather survival by necessity. German soldiers learned slowly. Their doctrine didn't include winter warfare training because their doctrine assumed wars ended before winter arrived. The learning curve was steep. Frostbite rates in German units reached catastrophic levels. Officers ordered buddy checks. Soldiers complied reluctantly because removing your boots in sub-zero cold was miserable. So soldiers skipped checks when they thought they could get away with it. The ones who skipped checks lost toes. Wind at 40 below killed faster than still air at the same temperature. Wind chill was the difference between manageable cold and deadly cold. Getting out of the wind meant digging down, covering up, or finding a structure that blocked airflow. Trenches worked because they put you below the wind. A trench dug 1 meter deep placed you beneath most of the horizontal wind speed. Deep dugouts were better. German engineers constructed dugouts 3 stories deep, 12 feet down, sometimes more. Reinforced with timber beams and concrete. These dugouts had electrical lighting, bunks, storage. 12 feet down, the earth provided insulation. Surface temperature might be 40 below, but underground it stayed closer to freezing. Soviet trenches were shallower, but they compensated with snow. Snow itself was insulation. Pack snow onto logs or branches to create a roof. The snow trapped air, preventing heat loss. Finnish troops dug trenches in snowdrifts, roofed them with pine branches, then piled more snow on top. Multiple soldiers sleeping together in a snow shelter could raise the interior temperature to just below freezing through body heat alone. Inside shelters, soldiers crowded together for warmth. Body heat mattered. 3 soldiers sleeping side by side stayed warmer than 3 soldiers sleeping separately. The Germans called this Kameradschaftswärme, comrade warmth. Some shelters had small wood stoves vented through improvised chimneys. The stoves burned constantly when fuel was available. When fuel wasn't available, they used anything combustible, furniture from abandoned houses, fence posts, ammunition crates. Before sleeping, you inspected your dugout for gaps where wind could enter. You checked your sleeping area for moisture. You positioned yourself away from walls where frost accumulated. You kept your boots inside your sleeping bag so they wouldn't freeze solid overnight. Then you slept in layers, fully dressed with your rifle next to you. You slept with your buddy for warmth. You woke every few hours to check that you were still warm enough. Vodka seemed like a solution. You drank it, and warmth spread through your chest. Your face flushed. Your fingers tingled. For 20 minutes, you felt almost comfortable. Then you froze worse than before. Alcohol dilates blood vessels, pushing blood from your core to your skin. This creates a sensation of warmth because your skin actually becomes warmer. Your core becomes colder. The heat you feel is your body radiating warmth outward into the freezing air. Alcohol also numbs sensation. You can't feel early frostbite forming. Your brain's warning system stops working. The Soviet Union learned this during the Winter War against Finland. Commissar Klement Voroshilov ordered daily vodka rations, 100 grams per soldier. Frostbite rates among troops receiving vodka rations were higher than rates among troops without. By 1942, the Soviet command stopped distributing vodka to common soldiers. This decision saved fingers and toes. Other mistakes killed just as efficiently. Touching metal with bare skin welded your flesh to the surface. At 40 below, any moisture on your skin froze instantly on contact. Your skin stuck to the metal, pulling away tore flesh. Staying in wet socks caused trench foot. Your feet stayed wet for hours or days. The constant moisture damaged capillaries and tissue. Your feet swelled, turned red or blue, began to smell like decay. The solution was changing socks frequently. Soviet supply depots issued 3 pairs of socks per soldier specifically for rotation, 1 pair worn, 1 pair drying, 1 pair stored. German soldiers didn't have spare socks. Falling asleep without shelter was death. Hypothermia sets in when core temperature drops below 35 degrees Celsius. Your body starts shutting down. You feel tired. You want to lie down. You close your eyes. You don't wake up. Every night, someone made a mistake. Every morning, fewer soldiers woke up. Over 4 years, Soviet frostbite rates dropped from 51% to 6%. Winters didn't get warmer, soldiers didn't get tougher. Institutional learning converted into survival protocols. The buddy system eliminated the problem of self-monitoring. You couldn't feel your own frostbite. Your buddy could see it. Forced mutual inspection caught damage before it became permanent. Layering managed moisture. Dry soldiers survived. Wet soldiers froze. Multiple thin layers allowed you to add or remove insulation based on activity level. Hot food delivery maintained core temperature. Mobile field kitchens were medical intervention. A soldier who ate hot stew twice a day maintained better circulation than one who ate frozen rations. Equipment adaptation mattered because physics doesn't negotiate. Standard gun oil froze at 40 below. Special low-temperature lubricants didn't. Soviet supply depots distributed cold-weather lubricants. German supply depots didn't. The Finns demonstrated that cultural knowledge mattered. Centuries of living in cold climates taught survival skills that couldn't be learned from manuals. Finnish soldiers knew instinctively how to check for frostbite, when to remove layers, how to build snow shelters. Over 100,000 German soldiers died from cold-related causes during the winter of 1942 to 43. Most of those deaths were preventable through basic preparation: winter uniforms, proper boots, cold weather training. The Wehrmacht had manufactured the winter gear. They'd stockpiled it in depots. They couldn't deliver the equipment to soldiers who needed it because their logistics system collapsed. Trains didn't run, trucks didn't start. Survival at 40 below was about boring, repetitive attention to detail. Check your feet every few hours. Change your socks when they get damp. Add layers before you feel cold. Remove layers before you sweat. Eat hot food when available. Sleep in groups for warmth. Do these things every single day and you survived. Skip one check, ignore one damp sock, fall asleep in the wrong place, and you died. Spring came. The temperature climbed above freezing, and men who'd survived stopped checking their feet every 3 hours. They stopped sleeping in their boots. They stopped inspecting each other for white, waxy flesh. Some walked away with all their fingers and toes. Some didn't. The ones who survived carried scars that had nothing to do with bullets. Phantom pain and amputated limbs, circulation problems that would plague them for decades, nightmares about waking up unable to feel their feet. They'd lived through temperatures that should have killed them. They'd watched friends freeze to death from mistakes that took seconds to make, touching metal barehanded, skipping one foot check, drinking vodka for warmth. The survivors understood something the dead never learned. At minus 40 degrees, your body becomes a machine that requires constant maintenance. Forgetting any step in the maintenance schedule means dying quietly while everyone around you keeps moving.